We've now got a major update in the Colorado trial seeking to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot. After a state court judge, Sarah Wallace, found that Trump did indeed incite an insurrection, but that presidents aren't subject to the 14th Amendment, the decision is now being appealed by both the watchdog group that brought the lawsuit for not outright disqualifying him from the ballot, and by the Trump team for ruling that he incited that insurrection. The case now heads to the Colorado Supreme Court, which has agreed to hear the case, and I should note that all 7 justices on the Colorado Supreme Court were appointed by Democratic governors. I'll get back to that part in just a moment. But first, I want to discuss this finding that the ban doesn't explicitly apply to presidents, although stating that it applies to officers of the United States. Judge Wallace wrote, quote, "After considering the arguments on both sides, the court is persuaded that officers of the United States did not include the President of the United States. It appears to the court that for whatever reason, the drafters of Section 3 did not intend to include a person who had only taken the presidential oath." But I would argue that this doesn't even pass the smell test. Why would the authors of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment go to all the trouble of banning insurrectionists from serving again in office, but leave a loophole solely for the president, who is the most powerful person in government? In other words, the authors didn't believe that senators and members of Congress and any other elected officials who'd engaged in insurrection should be allowed to serve again, but that a president who could do the most harm, who would wield the most power, should be able to? If there's logic in there, I've yet to find it. And that's a point that was echoed by my Democracy Watch co-host, Mark Elias.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense from a legislative intent standpoint, as you point out. Why would they pass this anti-rebellion and insurrection clause and somehow leave the president out? Like, why would that? How would that make any common sense? But beyond that, to read it out, you have to say that the president is not an officer of the United States. I mean, the president is the commander in chief, and the president is the chief officer of the United States. He is in fact, under conservative theories, where they talk about a unitary executive, he oversees. He is the only officer, in their view, of the executive branch of the United States. So I don't know how the judge got where they did to say that somehow the being president is not an officer of the United States. Clearly, the president takes the oath that's required by Section 3, and as you point out, the policy behind this, the purpose behind this, would clearly find the president fitting within it.
And of course, to see more episodes of Democracy Watch, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Now, I mentioned that the composition of the Colorado Supreme Court is that all 7 justices were appointed by Democrats. In terms of why that's especially important, here again is Mark Elias discussing how Judge Wallace's decision may actually have been a strategic play.
Look, some people have speculated that Judge Wallace is actually playing a very long game, a very smart long game, which is the judge found, as a matter of fact, that the former president engaged in insurrection. Okay, that is a factual determination, and that is entitled to great deference when it's reviewed by higher courts. She determined that as a matter of law, that the president does not fit within the definition of officer of the United States. That is a question of law that is reviewed afresh, what's called de novo. The court, by the appellate courts, they look at that for themselves. So if you wanted to take a more strategic view of this, you would say, look, what the judge did here is, knowing this would go up on appeal, she made the essential factual finding and knew that the legal determination was going to ultimately be decided by a higher court. And so she did the hard work. Now, whether she didn't take that extra step because of the tremendous pressure, the doxing, the intimidation, the threats that come to everyone who stands up to Donald Trump, I don't know. But it certainly may have been in her mind. I don't know.
In other words, even if, like me, you believe that Judge Wallace made a mistake by refusing to disqualify Trump from the ballot, it may not actually matter much, considering it was always a certainty that this case would be appealed to the state Supreme Court. But by ruling that Trump incited an insurrection as a matter of fact, and then ruling that the insurrection ban doesn't apply to presidents as a matter of law, she may have teed up the higher court to overturn her ruling and decide that because Donald Trump did incite an insurrection as a matter of fact, that the insurrection ban does apply to him and that he should be disqualified from the ballot. Of course, even the Colorado Supreme Court will likely not be the final arbiter of this decision, as it'll almost certainly be taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court, where we'll get a final decision on this issue. And then all of the other cases regarding this issue with scattershot rulings and decisions will ultimately comport with whatever the Supreme Court decides. And given the fact that states will need to print their primary ballots within the next month or so, we're all but certain to get a ruling on this issue, a definitive ruling, in the coming weeks. And look, I want to be clear that regardless of how the Colorado Supreme Court rules, and regardless of how the U.S. Supreme Court rules, what we already know as a matter of fact is disqualifying unto itself as far as Trump is concerned. The notion that America should elect to the highest office in the land a person whose final act in office was to undermine the results of a free and fair election and to put an end to the 200-year-old tradition of peaceful transfers of power is absurd on its face. And if his culpability wasn't already clear, the fact that a judge just confirmed as much is all the proof you need that he is an enemy of the United States of America, its Constitution, and the voters who already soundly rejected him at the ballot box. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.